Okay, today I'm going to talk to you about the electromagnetic spectrum. I'm going to introduce you to the concept of the spectrum, and we're going to have a look at the 7 different parts of the electromagnetic spectrum. Okay, so first of all, the electromagnetic spectrum is just made up of transverse waves. Now, it's split into 7 different parts. As you can see, I've done a kind of diagram of the waves and how they change as we go from one side to the other side. Now, all of these waves, all of them transfer energy. Now, we need to know the names and the order of these different waves, these different parts. So the first type here are radio waves. Now, once we've gone through the 7 parts, we're going to have a look at the actual differences between them. The second batch are microwaves. They have a slightly shorter wavelength than radio waves. Next up, we have infrared, then visible light. Now, visible light, this is the only part of the electromagnetic spectrum that we can actually see. So our eyes can detect these frequencies of the electromagnetic spectrum. We cannot see any of these other waves. This is why it's called the visible light section of the spectrum, this part here. The next part is ultraviolet, then X-rays, and finally we have gamma rays. Now, as you can see, it's a continuous spectrum that is then separated and split into these 7 different categories, these 7 different subsections. So what's the difference between the different sections? Now, basically, you have the 2 different ends of the spectrum with radio waves at one end and gamma rays all at the other. Now, as you can see here, the radio waves are the waves that have the longest wavelength. Remember, wavelength just means the distance between the peak of 2 waves like this. So they have by far the longest wavelength. Now, as you go further this way, the wavelength gets shorter and shorter between each wave. So each of these different subsections is just a category based on the wavelength. So right at this end, gamma rays, you can see these gamma rays have a really short wavelength. So that's how they're kind of separated into these different sections. It's also, we can have a look at how frequency changes as you go from one side to the other. The frequency means how many waves pass a point per second. So on this side, we actually have the lowest frequency in terms of our radio waves. Whereas over here, the gamma rays, we have a really, really high frequency. So this is where the frequency is highest. Now, basically, the higher the frequency of the wave, the more energy that it transfers. So therefore, it's more dangerous. So therefore, we have this side is described as being the most ionizing. So these waves, because of their high frequency, they transfer a lot of energy. So therefore, they are more dangerous. They're most ionizing. In another video, it describes what ionizing actually means. Whereas these ones here are the least ionizing due to their low frequency. Now, those are basically the features that split up. We then based on wavelength, they're separated into these 7 different sections. Now, a similarity between all of them, however, is they all travel at the same speed. They all travel at 300 million meters per second. So despite having different wavelengths, different frequencies, they all travel at the same speed, the speed of light, 300 million meters per second. So visible light travels at this speed in a vacuum, radio waves travel at this speed in a vacuum, and so does gamma rays travel at this speed in a vacuum. So those are similarities. Now, the final thing I want to say to introduce you to the electromagnetic spectrum is just a nice little mnemonic to help remember the order. Remember, we need to know the order that they come in. So, the little mnemonic is this: red monsters invade Venus using X-ray goggles. So here's the little monster to help you remember it. And there's his X-ray goggles. So, radio waves is the R. So red for radio waves. M for microwaves. I for infrared. V for visible light. U for ultraviolet. X for X-rays. And G for gamma rays. So red monsters invade Venus using X-ray goggles is a helpful way to remember the order of the electromagnetic spectrum. I've also made a video of each of these different types of waves to find out their uses and a little bit more information about each one. Thank you.